My sister pointed a gun at me and said, "Sign the papers or die." My father stood behind her, silent, just watching. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I just smiled and whispered, "Look over there." She turned, and her face crumbled. 5 seconds later, a bang shattered the silence. But if you think the story starts here, you're wrong. It began long before the gun, the lies, or the inheritance. It began when I was a child, forgotten, overlooked, unwanted. They never saw me coming. But today, they'll see everything, every secret, every betrayal, and I'm not walking away quietly. When the envelope arrived, I nearly threw it out. Handwritten address, no return label, the kind of thing that usually meant church flyers or holiday guilt trips. But when I saw my mother's cursive on the front, neat, sharp, like it always was, I froze. I hadn't heard from her in months. We weren't the calling kind of family, not unless someone died. Inside, the message was simple. "Come join us this weekend. We've rented a house outside the city to remember your grandfather. It would mean a lot to have you there. Mum." That was it. No warmth, no love, just obligation, dressed up as nostalgia. I reread it 3 times before setting it down. My fingers tingled. I had just gotten off the phone with the estate lawyer that morning. Grandpa Walter, the man who once taught me how to fix a leaky pipe and told me never to trust a man who wore shiny shoes, had left me everything. Not a share, not a split. Every last penny. Over $8 million wrapped in dusty old investments that had bloomed quietly over decades. And no one else knew. Not my mother, who always called him a burden. Not my father, who rolled his eyes at Grandpa's hand-me-down jeans. And definitely not Cassandra, my younger sister, who treated him like a ghost she was too good to see. They'd all expected nothing. So had I, if I'm being honest. Grandpa lived like a hermit, drove a 20-year-old truck, bought expired cereal on purpose. But somehow, underneath all that frugality, he'd built a fortune, and handed it all to the girl no one in the family had time for. I didn't know what to do with it yet. The money, the letter, the silence that followed. All I knew was that if my mother was reaching out now, inviting me to some remote memorial for the man she barely tolerated, something wasn't right. That night, as I stared at the ceiling in my 1-bedroom apartment, my phone buzzed. Cassandra. A text. "Come alone. Don't mention this to anyone. It's what Grandpa would have wanted." I sat up. The room felt colder. No smiley face, no heart emoji, not even a punctuation mark, just a command. "Come alone." I stared at the words, trying to decide whether it was a request or a warning. My stomach twisted. Cassandra never messaged me out of nowhere. If we weren't fighting, we weren't talking. And if she was being this secretive, I didn't know what game she was playing, but it didn't feel like a game at all. Part of me wanted to ignore it, toss the letter, block her number, let the past stay dead. But another part of me, the part Grandpa always said had grit, felt something sharper, a need to know, to look them in the eyes now that I held the cards. Maybe I wanted to see them squirm. Maybe I wanted proof that I was right to leave them behind. Or maybe, deep down, I hoped I was wrong, that they had changed, that this wasn't a trap. I packed light, 1 bag, no makeup, comfortable shoes, and before I zipped it shut, I slipped a tiny device into the front pocket, a voice recorder, just in case. When I arrived at the house on Saturday morning, it looked almost too ordinary. Beige siding, gravel driveway, a tired welcome mat at the door, the kind of place you could forget you'd ever been to. My mother's car was already parked out front. So was my father's old truck. And beside them, Cassandra's sleek black sedan gleamed in the sun like it didn't belong. I stood on the porch for a moment, listening. No birds, no wind, just the hum of something unseen. Then I knocked. The door creaked open before I knocked again. My mother's smile was already waiting, tight, polished, brittle, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Evelyn," she said, stepping aside, "you made it." The house smelled like lemons and old wood. A candle burned on the entryway table, too strong, as if it were trying to cover something up. My mother fussed over my coat, my shoes, my hair, as if we were a family that ever did that kind of thing. As if she hadn't once left me standing at a school play because she forgot the time. I offered her a neutral smile, stepping past her into the living room where my father sat, pretending to read the newspaper. He didn't look up. Typical. I moved toward the window, let my eyes drift out toward the yard, but I wasn't really seeing it. I was somewhere else entirely. Back in that narrow upstairs hallway of our old house, age 9, back pressed to the wall, listening to Cassandra get praised for her perfect grades, her piano recital, her volunteer work. She was their trophy, their angel, the girl with golden hair and a smile sharp enough to cut diamonds. I was the opposite. Too quiet, too messy, too forgettable. When I cried at night, no one came. When I brought home a drawing I was proud of, it ended up in the trash. One time, when I accidentally broke Mum's perfume bottle, she didn't yell. She just looked at me and said, "You really are a disappointment, Evelyn." That hurt worse. Cassandra would get caught sneaking out and still be taken for ice cream the next day. I got grounded for leaving a book out of place. And Liam, poor Liam, he never caused trouble, which meant he was invisible in a different way. Small, quiet, barely there. He clung to me like a shadow when we were little. But even then, I knew he wouldn't be able to protect me from them. He was just trying to survive too. There was one time I remember vividly, age 10. I had spilled juice on the carpet, an accident. My father didn't say a word, just grabbed my wrist and marched me to the utility room, the one without windows, locked me in there for 2 hours, no yelling, no lecture, just the dark and the sound of the washing machine thumping nearby. They always said I was too sensitive, overreacting, dramatic, but I knew the truth. I was disposable. The sound of my phone vibrating snapped me back. I glanced down, a message from Liam. "Can you talk?" I stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind me, and called him. "Hey," he answered, his voice low. "Why now?" I asked. "Why the invitation? Mom didn't even like Grandpa." A pause. Then I overheard them. Cassandra and Dad, last week. My pulse spiked. Overheard what? They were in the garage, thought I was out, Cassandra said. "She has no right to any of it. We fix this before the lawyers lock it down." And Dad didn't argue. I closed my eyes, the porch railing cold under my hand. "What else?" I asked. "They mentioned making it look civil, that you wouldn't see it coming." Cassandra said, "She'll fold. She always folds." I bit the inside of my cheek. "Why are you telling me this?" Another long silence, then softly, "Because you were the only one who ever looked out for me." I couldn't speak for a second. The old pain twisted in my chest. Recognition, sadness, something deeper. "Thanks," I said, voice thin. I needed to hear that. He hesitated. "Just be careful, okay? They don't play fair." "I know." I hung up and stared at the yard again. This time I saw it clearly. The trap wasn't coming. It was already here. The living room looked like something out of a rental catalogue. Too clean, too arranged, too impersonal. Beige furniture, floral print throw pillows, a table with coasters already laid out, as if no one trusted anyone not to ruin the surface. As if they were afraid of real life leaving a mark. "Come sit," my mother chirped from the kitchen. Her voice was too sweet, dipped in something syrupy and artificial. I followed it, stepping carefully across the hardwood floor like I might trigger a landmine. My father was already seated at the dining table, arms folded, staring blankly out the window. He hadn't said a word since I arrived. Not surprising. His specialty had always been silence weaponized. Cassandra burst in from the hallway like she was on stage. Hair curled to perfection, makeup flawless, a shade of red lipstick that said power and danger in the same breath. She hugged me like we hadn't grown up side by side in a house of unspoken rules and pointed silences. "You look amazing," she beamed. "So glad you're here." I nodded, lips pressed into a neutral line. "Thanks." She pulled out a chair for me. I sat down slowly, my spine straight, eyes scanning the room. That's when I noticed the clock on the wall, an old wooden one, painted over in pale green, ticking steadily above the fireplace, except it wasn't ticking. The second hand had stopped. 10 minutes past 2. I looked at my watch. It was nearly 3. I frowned. Maybe the battery had died, but something about it felt deliberate. Next, my eyes fell on the lamp in the corner. Its shade sat slightly askew, the bulb visibly shattered inside. No one seemed to notice. No one had bothered to fix it. For a family that liked things pristine, that was off. "Tea?" Mom called out, holding a tray like we were in a sitcom. "Sure," I said automatically. She set it down. 3 cups, no fourth. Cassandra reached for hers. My father didn't move. "Long drive?" she asked, taking a dainty sip like she hadn't sent me a warning days earlier. "Not bad," I replied. "Quiet." Silence stretched. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge in the next room. I took a slow breath, eyes drifting toward the kitchen. Something scratched at my memory, an itch, a whisper, something just under the surface. I stood up, too casually. "I'll get some napkins," I said. No one objected. In the kitchen, the light flickered above me. The walls were too bare. One corner near the ceiling had a tiny circular mark, about the size of a quarter, where the paint looked newer, fresher, not quite the same tone as the rest. I stepped closer. The edge of the moulding had a faint outline, a tiny wire groove that didn't quite match the others, like something had once been installed there, and then removed. A camera. I stepped back slowly, the breath in my lungs suddenly heavier. This wasn't a vacation rental, this wasn't a family memorial. This was a setup, and someone had already cleaned the crime scene. I turned and walked back into the dining room, sitting down with forced ease. Cassandra was laughing at something my mother had said, too loudly, too brightly. My father's eyes briefly flicked toward me, then away. I lifted the teacup. My hand didn't shake. "Everything okay?" my mother asked. "Fine," I said, smiling back, but my pulse was a drumbeat now. I wasn't just being watched, I was being handled. Lunch was a strange performance, carefully staged, unnervingly silent in the moments that should have been filled with casual noise. My mother laid out sandwiches cut into triangles, like we were children again, fruit in a glass bowl, a bag of chips poured into a ceramic dish to make it look homemade. No one spoke while serving themselves. It felt like we were all pretending to be something we weren't. I took a seat at the table, Cassandra across from me, my father at the head like he always used to. My mother fluttered around with a napkin in hand, straightening things that didn't need straightening. Her smile never slipped, but her eyes kept darting between us like she was waiting for a cue. "So," Cassandra began lightly, spearing a grape with her fork, "any plans with your part of Grandpa's, legacy?" The pause was too intentional. I looked up slowly. "What part?" She gave a little shrug, eyes glinting. "Well, I mean, you were always close to him. I'm sure he left you something." A chill slid down my back. She was testing the waters. I sipped my water before answering. "We'll see. Haven't looked into it yet." "Huh," she said, chewing thoughtfully. "I figured you'd have something lined up. Maybe a little trip, or finally fix up that apartment of yours." I didn't bite. "That apartment suits me just fine." Dad grunted at that, not a laugh, just a sound. Cassandra smiled wider. "We've just been wondering, that's all," she said. He wasn't exactly the type to talk finances, but he had things. little accounts, stuff tucked away. I tilted my head. Funny, I thought none of you cared about his stuff. That drew blood. Her smile thinned for a fraction of a second before she turned to my mother. Didn't Grandpa always say he wanted the family to stick together? That everything should stay in the family? My mother's hands stilled on the tablecloth. She looked at her lap. He valued unity, she said softly. He didn't like conflict. I nodded slowly. Yeah, that's why he stopped coming to holidays. Silence again, the kind that grows teeth. My father cleared his throat, still not meeting my eyes. We just hope you'll do the right thing, Evelyn. I turned to him fully. And what exactly is that? He didn't answer. Cassandra jumped in. You know, not make a big deal, not draw this out, keep things simple, civil, fair. Fair, I repeated. Interesting choice of word. Mom fidgeted, stacking plates that didn't need stacking. That's what he would have wanted, Cassandra said. To be fair to all of us. I leaned back, letting the silence thicken, letting them hang in it for a moment. Then I smiled slightly. You're all very concerned about what he would have wanted. Pity none of you asked him while he was alive. Cassandra's face twitched. She opened her mouth, but it was my mother who spoke next. We've done too much to get this far, she said, then stopped, eyes wide like she'd just dropped a match on gasoline. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. What was that? She looked at Cassandra. Cassandra shook her head subtly, fast. I didn't mean, my mother began. Yes, you did, I said quietly. Too much? Like what exactly? Just arrangements, she said quickly. Planning this weekend, getting everyone together. I didn't move. You've never planned anything in your life, Mum. Not unless there was something in it for you. Her mouth opened and closed. Cassandra laughed too loudly. Oh, come on, don't twist everything. Mom meant the sandwiches. The sandwiches, I repeated. Right. My mother stood abruptly. Anyone want more lemonade? No, I said, but I'd like to hear more about what we've done too much of. She turned toward the kitchen without answering. I watched her go. My father kept his eyes on the window. Cassandra picked at her food with suddenly more force than necessary. Something was unraveling, and none of them knew how to stitch it back. I wasn't just imagining it anymore. This wasn't just tension, it was guilt, fear, desperation, the kind that leaks through cracks when the pressure gets too high. Evelyn, could we speak in private for a moment? Cassandra's tone was smooth, rehearsed, too pleasant. I looked up from my untouched plate. My mother had retreated to the kitchen, clattering dishes she didn't need to wash. My father remained silent, eyes still locked on the horizon like he might see absolution out there if he stared hard enough. I glanced between them. Sure, I said. My voice was level, but every nerve buzzed like static under my skin. Cassandra gestured down the hallway. This way. My father stood without a word and followed her, heavy steps echoing off the hardwood. I trailed behind, my shoes muffled against the rug. We turned into a small side room, probably once an office. The curtains were drawn, no windows open, no breeze, just a table, 2 chairs, and a thick folder placed precisely at the centre. A small lamp glowed on a side table, casting the room in an amber hue. It made everything feel artificial, staged. The air was still. Sit, Cassandra said softly, already sliding into the chair opposite the folder. I did, slowly. My father stood near the door, arms crossed, blocking the only exit. This won't take long, she said, opening the folder with delicate fingers. We just want clarity, that's all. Inside were neatly stacked pages, legal documents with tabs and highlighted sections. My name was typed at the top. So was the phrase, voluntary disclaimer of inheritance rights. My stomach dropped. Cassandra pushed the folder toward me, then laid a pen beside it. It's just paperwork, she said, Nothing scary. I flipped through the pages. The language was formal, distant, clinical, but the message was clear. If I signed, I gave up everything. All of it. Every dollar Grandpa left me. Every account. Every asset. I don't understand, I said slowly. Why would I sign this? Cassandra hesitated. Her face softened. She looked down at the table, took a breath, and when she looked up again, her eyes were glossy. I didn't want to do this, she whispered. They're forcing me. I blinked. They said if I didn't get you to sign it, they'd cut me off. Everything. No more support, no more help. I'd lose everything, Evelyn. My head tilted slightly. Who said that? She looked toward the door. My father didn't move. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I thought maybe, if you understood, if you saw how scared I am, you'd help me. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked for once, fragile, human. I stared at her, the woman who'd mocked me for years, who rolled her eyes when I asked to borrow a dress for homecoming, who told our cousins I was adopted because she doesn't fit the vibe, and now she was pleading, or pretending to. Why not just ask? I said. She sniffed. Because asking never worked before. You always said no. That was when you were asking for my clothes, not my life. Her lips twitched. She looked down again. Just sign it, she said finally. Please. You don't even need the money. You don't live like this matters. I studied her. And you do? She didn't answer. My father shifted near the door, just enough to draw my attention. He was watching me, not speaking, not blinking, just waiting. You're both in on this, I said softly. Cassandra said nothing. I closed the folder slowly and pushed it back. No. Her head jerked up. What? No, I repeated. I'm not signing anything. She sat back, shoulders tightening. My father's mouth pressed into a line. I see, she said. The tears were gone now, just like that, like someone had flipped a switch. Then I guess we'll do this the hard way. The silence that followed my refusal thickened the air like smoke. Cassandra stared at me, her eyes unreadable now, dry, cold, calculating. Gone was the teary act, gone was the trembling lip. What remained was something far more dangerous, resolve. My father didn't move from his position by the door. He didn't need to. His presence alone blocked any thought of walking out. Not that I was going to. I wasn't done here. Are you sure about this? Cassandra asked quietly. This is your last chance to make it easy. I smiled, just a little. I've done easy before. It didn't get me far. She exhaled through her nose, lips pressed together. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached under the table. I tensed, instinct kicking in. When her hand came back into view, it held a small black pistol, sleek, clean, deadly. She rested it gently on the table, not aiming it yet, just showing it. My father didn't flinch, which told me this part wasn't spontaneous. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I didn't let it show. Cassandra, I said calmly, don't be stupid. She tilted her head. You think I won't? I think you haven't thought this through. Oh, I've thought about it a lot, she said, fingers brushing the barrel. You were always the problem, the wild card, the one who wouldn't fall in line. And pulling a gun on me is what? Discipline? It's a solution. I glanced toward my father. You're just going to let her do this? He said nothing, just stared at me with those empty eyes I remembered from childhood, the ones that never blinked when I cried, never looked away when I bled. That silence hurt more than the weapon on the table. I won't ask again, Cassandra said. Sign it. No. She stood. The gun came up. She held it steady, both hands now, aiming right at me. From the kitchen, the sound of running water masked the shift in the room. My mother was still busy, still pretending we were a normal family. I stayed seated. My breath was slow but deliberate. You're not going to shoot me, I said softly. Don't test me. You'd go to prison. Not if no one knows. That's when I smiled, a small, knowing curve of my lips, and I lifted my finger, pointed toward the upper corner of the room, just above the lamp, where the trim met the wall. Look at that. Cassandra's gaze followed my hand. Her face paled, a black dot, small, almost invisible if you weren't looking for it. Tucked into the corner, snug beneath the crown moulding, a camera, red light blinking. Say hi, I whispered. She stumbled back a step, lowering the gun slightly. What is that? You brought... I didn't trust this happy reunion, I said, so I prepared for it. My father stepped forward, but I raised my voice. Move, and this entire thing goes straight to the police. Real-time backup, cloud storage, off-site. You want to test that theory? He froze. Cassandra was still staring at the camera like it might bite her. Her hands trembled now. For real. You set us up, she hissed. No, I said. You set yourselves up. I just made sure someone would see it. You can't do this, she snapped. That's illegal. Recording without permission. I shrugged. So is threatening someone with a firearm. She raised the gun again in panic. Don't, I said quietly. That red light's still on. Her breath hitched. The barrel dipped again. This isn't over, she muttered. No, I agreed. It's just getting started. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one cornered. Cassandra's hands were shaking now, the gun hovering mid-air like she wasn't sure whether to drop it or pull the trigger. Her face had gone pale, but her eyes, those eyes, were still trying to figure a way out, a way through me. Put it down, I said, voice calm, measured. This isn't helping you. Her lips parted. You think you're so smart. Always the clever one. Always the outsider, playing some game the rest of us didn't know about. No, I said. I was just the one none of you saw coming. And then, just like that, her grip tightened, and the gun fired. The bang cracked through the air like a whip. My ears rang instantly. The scent of burnt powder filled the small room. Somewhere in the house, glass clinked. From the kitchen, my mother's startled voice echoed faintly. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. The shot hadn't hit me. It hadn't even come close. Cassandra had aimed high, into the wall just beneath the camera. But the little red light? Still blinking, still watching. She blinked too, staring at the spot she'd just fired on, then back to the gun in her hand. You missed, I said flatly. I wasn't trying to hit you, she snapped. I was trying to destroy the evidence? Her mouth opened, then closed. I stood slowly, pushing the chair back with a scrape against the wood floor. My father remained in place, unmoving. His arms were still crossed, but I could see the flicker in his eyes now. Not worry, fear. You brought a gun into a house with your mother 10 feet away, I said, and you fired it. She was supposed to be outside, Cassandra muttered. You weren't supposed to... I wasn't supposed to fight back, right? She didn't answer. I took a step closer. You don't even know what kind of gun that is, do you? She looked down at the weapon in her hands. Pull it again, I said. She stared at me. What? Do it. Her brow furrowed. You're insane. Maybe, I said, but I'm not bluffing. She hesitated, then squeezed the trigger again. Bang! This time, a puff of smoke burst from the barrel, but no hole appeared, no mark on the walls, just a loud, empty echo that faded faster than the first. Cassandra staggered backward, blinking. I tilted my head. Want to know why it didn't fire properly? She looked at me, wild now. What did you do? It's a prop, I said. Modified to fire blanks and powder bursts. Looks real, sounds real, but it's not. You're lying. Am I? She glanced at the gun again. Her hands were trembling so badly now, the barrel wavered like a flag in a storm. Where? How? I had someone sweep the house before I arrived, I said. Security professionals. They found the gun in your bag before dinner. She stared. They disabled it. Quietly. Put it back exactly as you left it. But the camera, also theirs. She looked toward the corner again, the little red light still blinking, still recording. I wanted to give you a chance, I said, to back off, to be human. Her knees buckled slightly and she grabbed the back of the chair for support. You set me up, she whispered. No, I said, you set yourself up. I just gave you the stage. My father finally spoke. This is madness. You can't record people like this. You'll be the one in trouble. I turned to him slowly. I'm not the one with a weapon. He looked at the gun in Cassandra's hand, then back at the camera. For the first time in my life, he looked unsure. Good. I stepped closer to Cassandra. You had a choice, I said. You could have asked. You could have walked away. You would have said no. Probably. Then what was the point? The point, I said, was to see what kind of person you really are. The room fell silent again. She dropped the gun. It hit the floor with a dull, empty clatter. No one moved, not even the camera, still watching, still blinking, still bearing witness. Before anyone could speak again, the front door creaked open. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moved across the hallway, not rushed, not panicked, confident, the kind of sound that made my heart slow instead of spike. Then 2 men stepped into the room, not cops, not family. Suits, earpieces, eyes sharp like they'd measured every exit the moment they walked in. One of them held a small black case. The other scanned the room, landed on the gun at Cassandra's feet, then at my father, still stiff and silent. Ms. Moore, the taller one said, nodding toward me. Right on time, I replied. Cassandra's eyes darted between them and me. Who are they? My security team, I said. Private, licensed, discreet. You hired bodyguards? My father snapped. Not just bodyguards, I said. They're also good with tech, surveillance, evidence gathering. The man with the case stepped forward, picked up the gun gently using gloves, and placed it inside the container like a fragile museum piece. The other man stood behind Cassandra, his presence towering without a single touch. You can't just bring strangers into a family matter, my father barked, stepping forward. The second man raised a hand, calm, firm. Please remain where you are, sir. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Cassandra backed up a step, bumping into the wall. You're bluffing, she hissed at me. None of this holds up. You can't prove anything. I looked her in the eye. You're wrong. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder, hit play. A static crackle. Then a voice, Cassandra's, sharp, urgent. She can't keep it. That money was supposed to be ours. She doesn't even deserve it. Then my mother's voice, softer but chillingly clear. She was never supposed to get anything. We need a plan, something that looks like it came from her. And then my father. Make her feel safe. Make her believe it's just about family. Once she signs, it's done. The room went still. The security men didn't flinch. Cassandra's mouth opened, closed. Her hands trembled now, real panic setting in. You were recording us? She breathed. No, I said. Liam was. She jerked like she'd been slapped. Liam? My father repeated, voice cracking. He told me everything, I said, and then he gave me that recording. My mother's footsteps echoed in the hallway, dishes clinking together as she carried them toward the kitchen. She paused in the doorway when she saw the scene. Her eyes swept across the table, the folder, the empty chair, and then to Cassandra. Her mouth parted. You didn't, she whispered. They already did, I said. My mother's face went pale. I didn't know she would, she started. You knew enough, I said, cutting her off. You were in the room. You said the words. Cassandra's legs gave out. She slid down the wall into a crouch, hugging her knees. The taller guard stepped forward, pulled a pair of zip ties from his belt. Ms. Moore, please place your hands in front of you, She looked up, horrified. "You're not cops. You can't arrest me." "No," I said, "but I can detain you until law enforcement arrives. The moment you brandished a weapon, you gave me full legal grounds." The sound of the zip ties tightening echoed like a lock sealing shut. Cassandra didn't resist. She was too far gone now, stunned into silence. My father took a shaky breath. "Evelyn, listen. You don't have to press charges. We're family." I met his gaze, steady and cold. "You're not my family, not anymore." He looked away. The guards stood ready, silent, waiting for my signal. I turned off the recorder, slipped it back into my pocket. For a moment, no one moved. The little red light on the ceiling still blinked, still watching, still keeping score. The law firm smelled like old wood and colder truths. I sat in a leather chair too big for the room, a folder on the table in front of me. Across from me, my lawyer, a man named Kirkland with salt and pepper hair and eyes like frosted glass, flipped through the contents with the detached efficiency of someone who'd seen worse, but not by much. I'd handed him everything, the camera footage, the audio file from Liam, timestamps, the altered weapon the guards had seized. A full breakdown of the events, complete with my written account, signed and notarized. "You planned this well," he said without looking up. "I had to." He nodded. "They'll say it was entrapment. I never gave them a script, just space to act." He offered a faint smile. An act they did. It moved quickly from there, faster than I expected, maybe because the evidence was too heavy to ignore, maybe because for once the system tilted toward truth. By the following week, the DA had the files. Subpoenas were issued. Investigators reviewed everything. They interviewed the guards, confirmed the timeline, the tampering with the weapon, the location of the hidden camera. It all fit, tightly, perfectly. And then came the hearing. Family court, criminal court, 2 different arenas, one collapsed family dragged through both. I sat on the plaintiff's side, alone, but not unsupported. Kirkland beside me, the guards behind me, Liam in the back row, silent but present. Cassandra was the first to be brought in. She wore beige. Her hair was pulled into a tight knot, her expression brittle. She didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone. The charges were read aloud: brandishing a firearm with intent to intimidate, attempted coercion, conspiracy to defraud. She didn't plead guilty, but the footage didn't care. Then came my father, Harold Moore, still trying to maintain control, even in court. He wore a suit, one size too stiff, sat upright as if posture might earn him sympathy. When the judge asked about his role, he claimed ignorance. "I didn't know what Cassandra planned." Then Kirkland played the tape. "Make her feel safe. Once she signs, it's done." That single sentence shattered his stance. He didn't speak again for the rest of the hearing, and finally, my mother. She came in last, Grace Moore, dressed in navy, minimal makeup. Her expression flickered between hurt and confusion, like she was the victim, like she couldn't understand how it had all come to this. She was asked directly, "Did you participate in the planning of this coercion scheme?" She shook her head. "No, I was just trying to keep the family together. I thought it was about a conversation. I didn't know they would go that far." Then Kirkland, with calm precision, queued up the part of the audio she hadn't expected us to keep. She was never supposed to get anything. "We need a plan. Something that looks like it came from her, her voice, her words." The judge leaned forward. "Is this your voice, Mrs. Moore?" Silence. Then, "Yes." It was the first honest thing she'd said in years. I didn't feel victorious watching them crumble. I felt still, like something inside me had finally gone quiet, like the pounding drum of injustice I'd carried since childhood had finally lost its rhythm. They weren't shouting anymore. They weren't mocking me. They were just people, caught cornered and slowly unraveling under the weight of their own choices. When the judge recessed for deliberation, I stepped outside the courtroom and sat on the bench. The hallway was empty. My hands were cold. Liam appeared a few minutes later, sat beside me, said nothing. I broke the silence first. "Thanks for backing me." He nodded. "You always did for me." We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but something passed between us, something real, something unbreakable. The verdicts would come in stages, but in that moment, sitting outside the courtroom, I already knew the truth. I wasn't part of their family anymore, and I was better for it. The final hearing came on a grey morning. Rain smeared the courthouse windows, blurring the outside world into streaks of soft, shapeless colour. Inside, everything was sharp, cold, precise. The courtroom was fuller this time, reporters in the back, legal assistants along the walls. The judge, deliberate and unsmiling, took her seat and called us all to order. First up, Cassandra. She stood, hands clasped, her lawyer beside her like a shadow that couldn't block the light anymore. The judge recited the charges again, brandishing a firearm, attempted coercion, conspiracy to defraud. It sounded even worse out loud, even heavier. "Ms. Cassandra Moore," the judge said, "after consideration of all evidence, including video footage, audio recordings, and sworn testimony, this court finds you guilty on all counts." There was a pause. Then, "You are hereby sentenced to 7 years in state prison, without eligibility for parole before year 4. Cassandra swayed slightly, blinking hard. Her lawyer said something low in her ear, but she didn't nod. She just stared straight ahead, face blank. Next, Harold, my father. He stood slower, older now in the light of consequence. His eyes darted once toward me, but I didn't flinch. "Mr. Harold Moore," the judge continued, "while you did not physically threaten or coerce your daughter, you were a knowing accomplice in the planning of the scheme. Your silence was complicity, your inaction, a choice." Another pause. "You are hereby sentenced to 3 years in county jail, no suspended time." His mouth twitched. Not a reaction of defiance, just disbelief maybe. The same disbelief he used to wear when I asked him to come to my school plays, when I begged him to listen. This time there was no escaping the consequences. And then finally, Grace, my mother. She stood already crying, makeup gone soft at the corners of her eyes. Her hands were folded like she thought posture might undo what had been said on tape. "Mrs. Grace Moore," the judge began, "the court acknowledges that while you were not physically involved in the act of intimidation, you were heard clearly and willingly participating in the planning and enabling of this plot." I saw her mouth part, ready to defend herself again, but the judge raised a hand. "I've listened to the tone of your voice on that tape. Cold, calculated, not confused. This court does not believe your role was passive." Grace dropped her gaze. "You are sentenced to 1 year of probation, with 500 hours of community service to be completed within 12 months. You will also retain a criminal record for conspiracy." A soft whimper slipped through her lips, and just like that, it was done. The gavel came down with a dull crack. 3 lives, fractured under weight they never thought would crush them. No one looked at me. They didn't cry out, beg, or rage. They simply stood still, finally still. As the courtroom emptied, I remained in my seat. Kirkland packed up the files. Liam squeezed my shoulder briefly before leaving. The security team waited outside. I didn't move. I sat alone in the wooden pew, eyes drifting to the bench where Grandpa Walter had once come to support me when no one else did. It wasn't here in this courtroom, but the feeling was the same. That quiet, dependable presence. He'd believed in me. He'd seen me. And now, everything he left behind, his words, his warnings, his wealth, had finally protected me. The rain outside continued to fall, softer now. Cleansing. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. There was no joy in seeing justice done to people who should have loved me, only peace. And in that silence, for the first time in a long time, I felt free. 3 weeks after the sentencing, I stood in front of a vault. Not a metaphorical one, a real brushed steel, bank-controlled vault inside the downtown branch of a firm I could barely afford to walk into before all of this. Now I owned the passcode. The lawyer handed me the last set of documents with a soft but definitive nod. "It's all yours, Ms. Moore. Everything your grandfather held, now in your name." Inside the vault were folders. Real estate deeds, investment portfolios, stock certificates so old they had typed headers and yellowed edges. Over $8.5 million worth. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, it was smart, strategic and patient, just like Grandpa Walter had always been. He hadn't hoarded gold or bought mansions. He'd lived small, thought long, and made every dollar count. It was a quiet empire, built not for show, but for survival. And now it was mine. I signed the final release papers and left the building with a briefcase full of legacy. But I didn't feel richer. I felt responsible. I didn't go shopping. I didn't buy a new car or book a flight to somewhere glamorous. I went home, same apartment, same tea-stained sofa, same second-hand bookshelf. I still grocery shopped with coupons, still wore clothes that fit, not that flaunted. Wealth, I realized, was only powerful when it wasn't obvious. That night, I poured a glass of wine and pulled out one last envelope from the vault folder. It was marked in Grandpa's handwriting, for Evelyn. Inside, a single page, a letter. Kid. If you're reading this, then the world finally got loud enough to notice you. I always saw you. Always knew you'd survive them. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for. Use what I left you the way I used it. Quietly, wisely. Don't waste it trying to prove anything. You don't have to prove a damn thing. But if you ever feel lost again, there's a key taped to the back of this letter. You'll know where it belongs. Love, W. I flipped the paper over. A key, small, rusted, worn, no label. I stared at it for a long time, turning it over in my palm like it might whisper directions. 3 days later, I found it, buried in the back pages of a real estate folder, behind a file so old it had been scanned but never digitized. One handwritten address, a property deed I hadn't noticed before, a cottage, remote, coastal, registered over 30 years ago in Walter's name, no mortgage, no taxes owed, a place no one knew about, not even my mother. I drove out alone. The road curved along cliffs and bluffs, each turn revealing more of the sea. The address took me to a gravel path, nearly overgrown. A mailbox leaned sideways, rusted with time. And at the end, the house. It was small, weathered shingles, a wraparound porch, a chimney that looked like it hadn't seen fire in decades. But it was perfect. And when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I knew what Grandpa had done. This was his hiding place, his retreat from a world that judged too loudly and loved too little. The walls were lined with books, the furniture mismatched but clean, and on the mantel a single frame, a photo of me, age 10, sitting beside him at a diner booth, both of us mid-laugh. I'd forgotten that day, but he hadn't. I sank into the couch and exhaled, letting the silence fold around me like a blanket. He didn't just leave me money, he left me space, and maybe that was the real legacy. The cottage became my sanctuary, but not for long. I spent a few quiet weeks there, breathing in salt air, reading Grandpa's books, and walking along the cliffs he must have wandered hundreds of times. The silence wasn't empty. It felt like presence, like memory, but I hadn't survived all this to hide. One morning, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the faded wallpaper and uneven cabinets, and I said it out loud. This place can't just be for me. I didn't want to build a museum to one man's quiet brilliance. I wanted to build something that echoed it, something that did what he always did for me, saw people no one else noticed. So I got to work, It started small: a new roof, reinforced foundation, updated plumbing. I hired local contractors who didn't ask questions and paid them well. Then I brought in a friend of Kirkland's, a non-profit consultant, and asked her one thing: how do I turn a house into a haven? 6 months later, the cottage was ready. New beds, a shared kitchen, quiet rooms with thick walls and locked drawers, a bookshelf in every room, a garden in the back. We called it Walter's Light. It became a transitional home for kids aged 12 to 18, specifically those who'd been kicked out, abused, or discarded by their own families, runaways, foster system burnouts, the ones most likely to slip through every crack. I used the trust Grandpa left behind to fund the entire operation. No donors, no press, just steady, reliable resources for people who didn't know what stability felt like. We had rules, of course: curfews, counselling, chores. But more than anything, we had safety and no judgment. Each kid who walked through that door heard the same thing: you are not a problem. You are not too much. You are not broken. The first girl who stayed with us was named Tasha. 14, brilliant with numbers, scared of closed doors. She stayed for 8 months, then left with a scholarship and a notebook full of coding sketches. She still emails me updates. Then came Matteo. Quiet. Wouldn't speak for the first 3 weeks, but he built a bench in the garden that still stands sturdier than anything we bought. Turns out he loved woodworking. They weren't statistics. They were stories that just needed a safer page. Meanwhile, I made sure Liam had everything he needed too. He never asked me for a dime. But I sent him his tuition notice the day he enrolled, already stamped paid in full. Later, I helped him lease a modest office space and connected him with a mentor from one of Grandpa's old investment circles. He started a business managing sustainable energy systems. Small scale at first, but honest. His voice changed after that. Not louder, just clearer, like he was finally breathing from his own lungs. One evening, he came to visit the cottage, walked through the halls slowly, touching the walls like they were sacred. "You built this?" he asked. "We did," I said. "Grandpa and I." He nodded. "It feels different, like something good happened here." I smiled. "That's the idea." We sat on the porch that night, the wind picking up along the coast. "You think it'll matter?" he asked quietly. "All this?" I looked at the light glowing from the windows inside, kids laughing, someone playing music too loud, the smell of soup drifting out like warmth itself. "Yes," I said, "it already does." That's when it clicked for me. Family wasn't the people who shared your blood. It was the people who saw your bruises and didn't flinch, the ones who didn't run when you got messy, the ones who stayed when staying was inconvenient. I didn't build a home. I built a second chance. And for every kid who walked through those doors and every scar they carried, visible or not, I wanted them to know one thing: you're not alone anymore. Not ever again. 5 years later, my life looked nothing like the version I once imagined from a folding chair in a courtroom. It was simpler, quieter, but far more real. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom home, nestled in a neighbourhood where kids rode bikes until sunset, and neighbours borrowed sugar like we were living in a sitcom. My car was a 5-year-old hybrid. My clothes came from local shops. My name wasn't on any flashy donor wall, and no one in my zip code knew I had more in my savings account than most of them would see in their lifetimes. I liked it that way. More importantly, I needed it that way, because the old version of my life, the one filled with performance, survival and scrutiny, had no place here. Not anymore. My husband, Daniel, was a middle school teacher, patient, steady, the kind of man who didn't flinch at late-night tears or ask me to explain the quiet. He'd come into my life not because I needed saving, but because I'd finally learned to let someone love me without conditions. And then there was Aria, our daughter, 4 years old, sharp as a tack, wild curls, full of questions. She loved butterflies, peanut butter sandwiches, and asking why more times than any grown adult could logically respond to in a single hour. She didn't know what I'd lived through, not yet. She knew that Mommy ran a place called Walter's Light, where big kids go to feel safe. She knew that Grandpa Walter loved old books and funny hats, and that sometimes we went to the beach cottage where his picture still sat on the mantel. That was enough. On Sundays, we painted birdhouses. On Wednesdays, we made pancakes for dinner. And every morning before preschool, she kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "You're the best mommy ever." I never told her how much that meant. I never told her that for a long time I didn't think I'd ever be anyone's mother. Because the kind of girl I used to be, the invisible one, the unwanted one, she wasn't supposed to grow into someone who raised another life. And yet here we were. It was a Tuesday when it happened. Spring, soft wind. Aria had just come home from preschool, glitter on her hands and a crumpled drawing in her backpack. We sat in the backyard, she in my lap, her fingers sticky from a juice box, when she looked up at me with those impossibly clear eyes and asked, "Mommy, why don't we ever visit Grandma?" My breath caught. I hadn't heard the word grandma in years. Not in my house, not out loud. Aria tilted her head. Everyone else at school has 2 grandmas. One of them bakes cookies. Do I have 2 grandmas? I looked at her. My daughter. My light. A question in her heart that she didn't yet understand the weight of. I could have lied. I could have redirected, distracted, changed the subject like every adult learns to do when things get hard. But I didn't. I pulled her a little closer. "You do have 2 grandmas," I said gently. "But one of them, she made choices that weren't kind." Aria blinked. "Did she hurt someone?" "Yes," I said. "Not with her hands, but with her heart." "Did she hurt you?" I nodded. "She did." "Is that why we don't see her?" "That's why." She thought about that, her little fingers tracing the seam of my sleeve. "Will I ever meet her?" "Maybe," I said, "when you're older, when you're ready." Aria went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I think I like the grandma in the picture better." I smiled. So did I. We didn't talk about it again that night. We didn't need to. Some questions, once answered honestly, don't need repeating. That night, after Aria had gone to bed, I stood in the doorway of her room and just watched her sleep. Her curls were a tangled halo on her pillow, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly to her chest, one tiny foot sticking out from beneath the blanket. She breathed softly, steady, safe. I rested my hand on the doorframe, the wood smooth and cool against my skin. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. There was something stronger than tears swelling inside me, something older, deeper, a knowing that this moment, this quiet, ordinary slice of life, was something I'd fought for, bled for, survived for. And then, like all things in motherhood, the moment passed with a creak from the hallway and a call from the kitchen. Daniel was pouring tea. He handed me a mug without asking what was wrong. He didn't need to. He'd heard the question too. "She asked about your mother," he said gently. I nodded. "You okay?" I sat down at the table and let the mug warm my hands. "Yeah, I think I am." We didn't say much else. The next day, Aria asked again. This time, in the car on the way to preschool. Her voice was smaller, but the curiosity still there. "Mommy, why don't we visit her? Grandma!" I pulled the car over, put it in park. Then I turned around in my seat and looked at her. And I didn't dodge it. I didn't soften it with platitudes or half-truths. Instead, I reached back, took her tiny hand in mine, and said, "Because not everyone who gives you life gives you love." She didn't ask more. She just squeezed my hand, then went back to humming a song about rainbows and sandwiches. Children, I realized, are wise in ways we forget as adults. They don't always need the details, just the truth. That weekend, We went back to the beach house. The kids at Walter's Light were busy with a group project, so Daniel, Aria and I had the place to ourselves. We grilled outside, collected seashells, and built a sandcastle that was doomed from the start, but beautiful all the same. On Sunday morning, while Daniel packed up our bags, I walked out onto the porch with my coffee. Aria was in the yard, chasing butterflies, laughing. Her voice rang out across the grass, pure and unburdened. She wore overalls and had a flower tucked behind her ear, courtesy of Daniel, who never forgot to find her something magical when we travelled. She ran in circles, arms stretched wide like airplane wings. And Daniel, my quiet, steady, extraordinary husband, chased after her, pretending to be a monster, roaring with exaggerated drama until she collapsed into giggles. They rolled on the grass. She tackled him. He let her win. And for a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because I was sad, not because I was overwhelmed, but because it hit me, suddenly, powerfully, and with absolute clarity. This was the thing I'd never been given. This was the inheritance I'd never expected. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the justice. It was this joy, this peace, this love without transaction or tension or obligation, this freedom to simply exist, to belong. I stepped down onto the lawn, barefoot. Aria saw me first. "Mommy!" she shouted, running toward me like the wind. I caught her, lifted her up, spun her once. She shrieked with delight. Daniel walked up behind us, rested a hand on my back. We stood there, the three of us, the wind tangling in our hair, the sun rising behind the old cottage. And I whispered, not to them, but to myself, to Grandpa, to the girl I used to be. This is the real inheritance.